Joining me now to discuss this is Sky News contributors Louise Roberts, and we've got Adoni Media founder Lisa Goddard. Louise, I'll start with you. Is the PM right? Is Kevin Rudd safe as houses? He's working his guts out for Australia in his current role. And is it good for Australia to have someone in there who the Trump administration obviously has some issues with?
Yeah, so hi Rita. So look, Kevin Rudd is Donald Trump's punchline. That much is evidence. We've seen that. The whole world has seen that this week. And is he safe in his job? Well, yes, because the PM won't sack him because he'll lose face. He'll look like he's made the wrong decision in appointing him in the first place. But that doesn't mean that Kevin Rudd is effective. I mean, Penny Wong was saying that he was working very hard behind the scenes to make this meeting happen. And of course, the PM himself has endorsed him 100%. Overnight, but we have no proof of any of this actually happening behind the scenes at all. And what we have is a complacent diplomatic situation here. And what we need is an envoy who is respected on both sides of US politics, not someone who's a punchline in a joke. And there must be many other candidates who'd be more suitable for this role. And we spoke about this in July, didn't we? And I wrote a column saying that if, Kevin Rudd was serious about building and maintaining a strong relationship with the US, he should resign his position. And I haven't changed my mind from that because clearly he's not going to be fired, is he?
Well, Lisa, Kevin Rudd's always for Kevin Rudd. I think that much is pretty clear to me anyway. What he has said, there's been plenty of people who have said unkind things about Donald Trump, unwise things about Donald Trump, but Kevin took it one step further. And I do wonder whether the Prime Minister and his government are worried about what Kevin Rudd will say if they do remove him. Is he going to go on another rampage, posting all sorts of things on Twitter and on his other platforms?
Well, Rita, firstly, I think we were all expecting to have the popcorn out because we thought it would be Albanese that we were sitting here and shaking our heads at and possibly laughing at. But the tables were turned and it ended up being Rudd. So that's where we were sitting eating our popcorn. But look, what it all proved is that you can't take Donald Trump as a village idiot. And I think that is what Rudd did. He was absolutely humiliated there. But then today, we've seen Albanese come out and defend him. As you said, you played the clip from Penny Wong. What they're painting this as now in their damage control is that Kevin Rudd is somehow the hero. Kevin Rudd is the person who has made all of these announcements possible. It's all of his success. So my question is, by the time Albanese's feet land back in Australia, how do they then spin that so that he is the hero? Because they want him to be the person who had the great relationship with Trump, who made AUKUS happen, who made the critical minerals deal happen. But at the moment, they're trying to protect Rudd and say he's a success story. So I think there's a lot of messaging and spinning to happen behind the scenes to try to repair this. And I think he's as safe as houses.
Well, again, it's all about Kevin. Instead of focusing on this deal, like you said, instead of focusing on the Prime Minister and the relationship he's rebuilding with the Trump administration, we're all talking about Kevin. And surely that is not good for either the Albanese government or for the country. So I'm surprised for the good of the government, he isn't stepping down. Surely he knows his position there is an issue. Now let's talk about local issues. Here in Victoria, there's been some polling done by the Institute of Public Affairs, and it shows only 37% of Victorians support the Allan Labor government's Indigenous treaty. 42% say they oppose it, and we've got 21% who are still undecided. Lisa, the fact that you've got 21% undecided, I think, is an indictment on the media, but even more so, it's an indictment on the Liberal Party, who have not leaned into this issue. It is an enormous issue. The scope of this legislation is huge, and yet the Libs seem to be running scared.
Yeah, I was surprised. It was last month when this was first announced. And on that night, I watched both the opposition leader and the Aboriginal Affairs spokesperson for the Liberal Party here on Sky. And neither of them, when their feet were held to the fire, could come out hard and say they were against this treaty, that they could come out and say, this is what the Liberal Party will do. And I think that is what they're lacking across many different policy areas in Victoria. They're not offering up an opposition at all. And now, nearly 5-6 weeks later, they finally come out and said, well, it's not that we'll repeal the treaty, but we will then put in our own advisory body or advisory council or whatever nice word they put around it. So they're not saying, no, we are not going to divide and be divisive in Victoria. They're saying they're still going to kowtow down and push ahead with some sort of Indigenous group when you've got, 58%, I think, or 55% of Victorians said no to the voice. So I'm not surprised by those figures.
Yep, Victorians didn't vote for a state-based voice or a state-based treaty, Louise, but we've got one. It's going to be enormously costly, but even more importantly than that, it's going to be enormously divisive, and the powers it has, the influence it will have, again, Victorians didn't vote for that, and we need the Liberals to actually give people a choice. We need them to stand up and fight these consequential issues.
Yes, we do. You're absolutely right. And the figure being bandied around is, $70 million. And what is that for? To create another bureaucracy, which we clearly don't need. And moreover, Jacinta Allen needs to focus on one thing in Victoria, law and order. That's the only thing people are talking about and the only thing residents are really concerned about. They don't want a treaty. They don't want any sort of legislation which is sort of dressed up as a Voice 2.0. And they don't feel that, even Aboriginal Australians don't feel this is a good plan for Victoria. So why she's pushing ahead with it blindly is an absolute mystery to me when there are so many critical things she could be focused on.